Well, welcome back to Loaded Landscapes. My name's Simon Plant, and today we're going to do some tilt shift effects on an aerial photograph. So I thought we'd have a play around today with tilt shift effects on this aerial picture. Tilt shift, if you've not seen it, do a little search on the internet. It's an effect which actually it originates from big plate cameras. You know, those big old-fashioned 5x4, 10x8, 11x14 monster cameras, where the lens was located mounted on the front of the camera. Then you had a big bellows, and as you had the film located in a dark slide on the back of the camera, and the lens and the back of the camera could operate completely separate from each other, and allowing you to have precise control over focus. It also allows you to do some special effects, for want of a better word, by rotating the film plane in a different direction to the lens, and you get this kind of weird drop focus effect, which is where this derives from. If you've got a scene with lots of people walking around, maybe again an aerial picture or a shot from a high angle, it can almost make the scene look like a toy model. So anyway, do a little search and you'll see what I mean. So I thought we'd go into Photoshop and we'd try and recreate that kind of effect. So we're in Lightroom. The first thing I'm going to do is select my layer, press Command or Control J to duplicate it. We're then going to go to Filter, go to Blur Gallery, and then we've got a section here called Tilt Shift. Now, obviously you could do this different ways, but this filter is specifically, let's get my words out, designed for this type of effect. So you've got this grid overlay, and in the middle is like a little wheel which can increase the blur or decrease the blurring effect, and you can hover over these little pinpoints here, and you can rotate the filter direction you want. So I want to turn it around to this angle somewhere, not too far, like so. And then these, I'm going to turn the blurring up first of all. I'm going to turn the blurring up by going up here rather than fiddle with the dial. I'm going to turn it up quite high to begin with so we can see what we're doing. So this will affect, the center bit here will affect what's sharp and what's blurred. And the dotted line, you can drag these out and it will affect the transition of the blurring. So for instance, if I pull, let me just turn the blurring up a little bit more, show you what I mean. So let's turn this right up. If I pull this in, if you watch the tree, you can see the blurring, the way it transitions is more sharp and more abrupt as I pull it up. And as I pull it down, we can then control how soft that goes and how quickly. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So it's basically affecting the transition. Same with the top one. We can pull it out and have it blur more slowly or more abruptly. For the majority of the time, I would have these set quite wide apart so you get a nice soft transition and nothing too abrupt. We can position these lines to allow what we want in focus and what we want to be softened and blurred. So I basically want with this image, I want to sort of drop the focus on the bottom of this tree a little bit and allow it then to be sharp a bit further in, perhaps down here, and then gradually soften up towards the sky. I don't mind the sky going soft, but I will keep the transition here quite nice and subtle. Something like that looks pretty good. Okay, may not want it quite that strong, so I can always back that off. Okay, something like that. And you can have a play around with these sliders. You probably may want to come back. Good idea to have this as a smart object so you can go back and re-edit it until you get it exactly how you want. So I'm just going to pull that up as well a little bit. So that's looking pretty good. Now the other things here, you can affect obviously the blurring here, and also the distortion. If you look down the bottom here, as I move this distortion slider, it changes the way that kind of blurring takes place. I'm going to turn it back up a minute so I can show you better. So you can see that blurring is changing, and you can alter that to your taste. Somewhere around there looks pretty good. If you tick this box, it will do the same kind of distortion to the top half of the image. By default, it only applies it to the bottom half. Don't know why, but it does. And it's not going to make a lot of difference to this image because there's obviously not a lot of detail at the top there. And then you've got the light bokeh. This is, I don't use this very much. It can be a bit abrupt if you're not very careful with it. But basically, you turn up the bokeh and it basically clips the highlights. But if you go too far, it's going to look a bit of a mess. Color will alter the saturation, basically in where the bokeh is occurring. And light range is how much of that bokeh affects the image. So if we turn this up, we can take it away from the shadow areas. And if we bring it all the way down, it's affecting the whole image, if that makes sense. Same with the highlights. If you don't want on the highlights quite so much, you can bring it down. You do get some quite cool effects, but just go a bit careful with it. Let me just turn the colour down a bit. So it is quite cool. You can have a play around with that. I don't tend to use it, but let's leave that for now up there. So I'm just going to turn my blurring down a little bit, like so. And then that is about it. So we can click OK, and that should pop out into Photoshop with our blur in there. And you can see it's added quite a nice effect. I'm not too sure about this, so I'm going to go back in. I'm going to turn off basically the light bokeh. Although I must admit, it does make a little bit of difference. So maybe bring it back up, but we'll drop the color saturation down quite a bit. I'm also going to turn up the blurring, and this is why it's good to experiment. Sorry, not experiment, to have this as a smart object, because you can come back in and keep it re-editing to suit. Click OK again. So tilt shift is done. There's before. There's after, so I think it's added quite a nice effect to the image. Also, you can spend a bit more time than I have here perfecting that. I think what I would do with this one is maybe make a new blank layer and get the gradient tool, set the second gradient there, the radial gradient. I'm going to click on the eyedropper. I'm just going to pick out a bit of colour out of this image, somewhere in the sky there. Maybe a little bit more saturation. Click OK. And I'm going to draw a gradient, just add a bit of flare to this image. Something like that. Change the blend mode from normal down to screen. And just drop down the opacity a little bit, just to add a little bit more flare to the picture. Something like that. So I think that's created quite a nice effect in a very, very short space of time. It's not hard to use, as you can see. Pretty straightforward. Just needs a bit of restraint. You don't want to overdo it, because otherwise it looks awful. And I think it's well suited to aerial type pictures. So there we have it. Quite a quick one. As you can see, but I hope you've given you a few ideas, and you can go away and experiment. It works really well actually on not just aerial stuff, obviously, but on portraits. So if you've got a 3/4 shot and you want to blur the bottom half of the image, you get some really nice effects. So well worth having a play around with. So until the next time, I'm off to kill a fly that's been bothering me while I'm recording, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers for watching.